Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. Thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It really does only take you 5 seconds. While you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out even more. And I cannot say this enough, thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot, and it does a huge amount to help us out. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going alright, Mark. Good to see you again. How you getting on?
Not bad. Lewis, I think that we have to address the elephant in the room right away. This podcast is coming out a day late, and the reason for that is because we chose to watch the football. It was one of the biggest football matches, arguably, for Scotland in our lifetime, and in true Scotland fashion, they went out just spectacularly. 3-1, largely dominated for the whole game. We're second best throughout. However, we gave it some spirit. It was an important match. We wanted to watch it. We're sorry that this is a day late, but deal with it.
Yeah, it happens once every 23 years, so don't
exactly.
Expect
and we nearly got out of the
again.
group stages, or we had hope of getting out of the group stages. I say nearly got out of the group stages. We had hope for getting out of the group stages.
Yeah. We had hope of coming third, better than some other teams did.
Exactly, that was a huge step up for us. Anyway, Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Only more Resident Evil 8, really. I've still, partly because of the football and various other life things, I've not had tons of time still for really settling into this game. And honestly, it's not a game that I love playing for huge, long, extended sessions, because it's quite up and down in terms of trying to scare the bejesus out of you and keep you pretty tense. So I've pushed on a bit. I've got through the first section, the Castle Dimitrescu section. I've got through the second section, which is House Beneviento, which I think is the strongest bit of the game so far for me. I thought what they were doing there, I won't spoil it for anyone who's yet to play it, but it's a really good bit of game design, I thought, in terms of introducing, similarly to what Resident Evil 7 did, introduces a kind of new type of horror. But yeah, so far so Resident Evil. I'm not totally in love with this game, I've got to say. I think I do prefer 7 thus far, and that's partly that I think I do prefer the survival horror-y element over the slightly more action focused thing that this game is doing. But I think mainly it does come down to the setting and the enemies and stuff like that. I'm just not very interested in the village and in the Lycans and in the vampires. It's just all very slightly too kind of hammer horror daftness to me, in a way that 7, I can still feel that feeling when you first enter the basement and the molded come sort of lurching out of the walls towards you, and finding that really quite unsettling. And in this one, I'm kind of like, oh, just fuck off, you werewolf, you know?
I do kind of get that, man, to be honest with you. I do. I thought that the characters in 8 were good, though. Like, I think that the Duke is absolutely fucking stellar. I think that he is great. I think that Lady Dimitrescu is fantastic as well. I do think that thereafter some of the other characters are slightly less interesting, I do have to say, but that goes up against some really strong characters from 7 as well, to be honest with you.
Absolutely,
I think that, well, Jack in particular was awesome, obviously, but what was the Saw guy called as well? He was great.
Lucas, the son.
Lucas, really. Even Marguerite. In fact, you know what? Maybe I'm talking myself into liking 7 more. Anyway, my point is that in my mind, these two games are like very linked because I played them so close to one another.
Yeah.
I do think that you are in a sort of unfortunate position that because you've not been able to play it like and get a good run at it, sort of thing, is that you're maybe playing it sort of in a more stagnated way, and that's not necessarily your fault or whatever. It's just not generally how you want to consume entertainment media, you know what I mean? You don't want to take huge gaps in between your experiences of it. I must admit, like, I really enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was great, but I did like those more action-y moments probably more than you are, it sounds like, and that's probably what it comes down to in reality.
Don't get me wrong, it's not that it's bad at all. There's not a lot to choose between the two games at all, and if you liked 7, I think you'll like 8. This is more or less what you were saying, that they're quite balanced in your mind. It's just personal preference in a lot of ways, that the kind of story and the world that 7 was in, I found slightly more interesting. But, I'm only about halfway through this game now, basically, maybe just slightly north of that, so still a lot to get through, and some other bosses and some other characters and stuff to see, and I'm kind of only now getting this sense of how the village changes. That's, sort of what happens in between these bossy sections. So yeah, it's all really interesting. It's just not quite grabbed me the way that 7 did, but maybe that's partly just that the shock of switching to first person, that different type of horror game was so strong there, you know, and this feels like an expansion of that almost. But yeah, enjoying it. I would recommend it. It's just, I would recommend playing 7 first, definitely.
I mean, I would agree with that, definitely.
And what about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, I've just been continuing my playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, and as I was telling you off air the other day, I've actually got to the last mission. It surprised me that it was the last mission, because it's sort of come a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. Even in terms of narrative, I thought that there was more to happen here, you know what I mean? And as it turns out, no, there's not. There's one final mission. I've not done any Googling or whatever to find out what happens at the end, but basically it was saying you will not be able to go back and do any side missions or whatever when you start this mission. This will be you playing through to the end, sort of thing.
Right, it does warn you then. That's good to know, at least.
It does warn you, and that's what I was thinking to myself, oh, is this actually the last mission? And it is the last mission of like the main campaign. I have been doing a lot of the side missions. In fact, I've been doing all of the side missions, but they do have other additional content, which are largely called gigs, which range from anything to buying a car to murdering a whole bunch of people, basically. And it's not even that they aren't interesting, it's just not like core story, do you know what I mean? Whereas a lot of the other side missions are, so I've been focusing on them. So really, Cyberpunk is now however long I want to make it, Liz, I suppose. I think I will probably finish the remaining side missions that I've got to do, because they are interesting and they are quite good, and the narrative of the game and the world that they've created there is definitely the strongest part of the game for me anyway. So I don't mind doing the side missions, certainly not. But I have to admit, that main campaign has ended way sooner than I thought it was. I even knew going in, of course, that the game was way shorter than The Witcher. Like, I knew that going in, of course I knew that going in, but even still, it does feel a bit all of a sudden. It does feel as if, I don't know, like maybe this narrative had more to give and some of it had to be lost at some point. I don't know. Like, we know how this game came out. Were they making cuts here, there and everywhere? I don't know, but it felt as if this narrative had more to give. Having said that, I've not played the end yet, so I will reserve judgment there. But Lewis, there are things that are beginning to grate on me in the game, and it is largely traversing the world.
All right, okay.
Driving in this game is really, it goes between being incredibly boring to like infuriating beyond imagination. Like, vehicles seem to neither want to slow down or turn corners, which is a real bad combination, I find, for cars. Every time that you come up to a bend and you're driving quickly, because of course you're driving quickly, it's fun to drive quickly, right? So you slam on the brakes and you turn your analog stick to the direction that you want to go, and sometimes it seems to want to turn and sometimes it doesn't. It sort of depends on what speed you're going. And I know that people are going to be saying to me, oh well, you can't turn a right angled corner at 60 miles an hour or whatever I'm trying to do, of course. But I would say back to you, that is true. Very well done on being correct on that. That is incredibly unfun in a video game. Either you dither round corners incredibly slowly, it feels like, or you drive quite quickly in a straight line, then you absolutely hammer on the anchors, hope that you slow down enough when you're like in the middle of the junction, basically, then turn, then accelerate away again. It doesn't feel very good. No driving, I don't think anyway. I've not found a car that feels very good. I think that the motorbike that you get, like, given extremely early on in the game is the most drivable vehicle that I've had.
Yeah.
And I've basically used that throughout the entire game. The mini-map, Lewis, oh my Jesus. You know how in every driving game that I think I can remember, including open world games like GTA, when you're driving quicker, the mini-map would like zoom out a bit so that you had more time to react to upcoming corners. But this one doesn't. It's very, very close in. And that, literally, I don't know if this is a glitch. Like, that could be a glitch for all I know. But in my game, this map does not zoom out. And it seems very, very close in. So any corner that you come up against, so you've got your wee dotted line on your minimap, takes you by surprise every fucking time. Every single time. And then you're going up to junctions and you're thinking, oh, is this the one where I turn left? Oh, no, it's not. This one I can keep going. Oh, is it this one? Oh, slam on the fucking brakes. Hope you stop in time to turn. Every single time. Every single fucking time. In this game as well, that there's nothing actually on the road in like a GTA style where there's like arrow markings on the road basically to show you where to go, which in that game like narratively don't make any sense. Like, that's just a video game thing to tell you where to go to make it easy for you to navigate around this world. Whereas in this game there is clear narrative justification to do that. You can have it be part of your cyberpunk eyes that just happens when you drive, but they don't do it. It is incredibly infuriating, which means that you're always flicking between looking at your minimap, which is way too close, and driving your car, trying to to at least have some fun driving at speed or dither around really slow. It's awful. It's absolutely awful to drive around in this game. It really, really is. I've persisted in it because I also don't want to use the fast travel system, because despite the fact that I play on the PlayStation 5, Lewis, the loading times in this game are pretty long. I don't know if it's just not optimised for the PlayStation 5. Obviously, we know that games far superior to this can load nearly instantaneously. So I don't know if this just can't manage that or isn't optimised for the PlayStation 5 or whatever. I would be scared to think about how bad it would be on base PlayStations. But yeah, man, honestly, traversal and that mini-map and the actual map of the game as well, like the actual map in the game is totally fucking useless as well, because of the way that the city is built. There's a lot of like verticality to it, basically, which means that when you're looking flat down on a map, it's very unclear often where you are, and it's just a bit of a rubbish map in general, to be honest. These are wee things that in isolation you're thinking, oh well, that's probably not that big a deal, but over the course of playing the whole fucking game, it really does grate on you, Liz. It really does grate on you after a while.
A lot of wee things like that just really affect your feeling of the quality of life of playing the game. What does it feel like? How well does it feel to play? And that coupled with the bugs, it just doesn't sound like a particularly great concoction.
I've got to say, since I started playing this game, there has been a patch in the middle, basically. So between when I started playing this game and now, there's been another patch. Yeah. And I have got consistently less crashes now. That's good. Do have to say that. So that is
not zero crashes though.
It might be zero crashes. Maybe one. Maybe one, actually. Maybe one.
One is, forgivable. A lot of games will crash.
One is forgivable, but before that, I think in the 2 play sessions before that, I had 2 crashes in each of them, which it really is not great. One. It really isn't one. So yeah, far from a perfect game. I honestly have enjoyed my time with it. I liked it fine. It is not a groundbreaking RPG by any stretch of the imagination, either in concept or narrative or in execution. It is a fine game. It is completely fine, apart from the bugs, which I'm hoping are going to get cleaned out at some point. Anyway, Lewis, on to the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1, and sticking with Cyberpunk 2077, it is back on the PlayStation Store. Huzzah! Huzzah! Sony removed Cyberpunk from the PlayStation Store only a week after the game's release in December last year. This was after both the Xbox One version and the PlayStation 4 version of the game were nearly unplayable due to bugs at the time. And everyone as well has to remember that this is still a last-gen game. There is no PlayStation 5 and there is no Xbox Series X version of this game. This is a last-generation game that basically doesn't play on the last-generation consoles that it was designed to play on. Cyberpunk have said in a tweet that some of the performance issues with the PlayStation 4 edition may continue as they continue to improve the stability of the game, and they have said that for the best experience, air quotes, you should play on the PlayStation 4 Pro or the PlayStation 5, although that is technically true of every game. PlayStation themselves were a bit more clear and actively recommended playing on the PlayStation 4 Pro or the PlayStation 5, not the base PlayStation 4. So, Lewis, this sort of begs the question a little bit, I think. If this game is designed as a PlayStation 4 game to be played on the base PlayStation 4, but even the platform holder themselves are essentially saying here, you are going to have a bad experience here if you play on an OG PlayStation 4. Should this game be back? Really? If that's the case? Do you know what I mean? I mean, in the face of the fact that this game has always been available on the Xbox One store, you know what I mean? They never took it down at any point, but PlayStation did and have now decided this is the time to put it back up, but are still saying on the PlayStation 4, on the base PlayStation 4, you're probably going to have a bad time here.
Yeah, I think that's it's a big and quite a difficult question because, I mean, straight off the bat, I would say I don't want anyone to be deprived of a game that they want. So, no, the idea of it being on sale, I guess, generally is a good thing. But yeah, I think this is kind of problematic when you think that the game was basically removed from the PlayStation Store because of the whole debacle around CDPR saying, just speak to Sony for a refund if your game is crashing a lot. And I mean, none of this has ever been officially confirmed, but it seems basically like Sony were thinking, well, fuck this, we're just going to punt your game off the store.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not
very much
with
felt
that.
Like a fuck you move. Yeah.
And so now it feels a bit like they're saying the game's sort of stable enough on enough of our systems that we'll sell it to you, and it's kind of up to you whether or not you take that risk on a base console. I mean, I think it's good that they are putting that warning on about, and I'm assuming that is coming up in the actual store and not just in a blog post or something like that.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Well,
I need to go and look, to be honest with you. It's actually
check.
just came back up. What was it, today or yesterday?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I'll maybe need to go and look into that, actually. That'll be very interesting.
If it does warn you at that point, or even, maybe, I don't know if they have the functionality for this, but if it could stop you from buying it if you're playing on a PS4, an original PS4, then I think overall it's probably okay, because if it's sort of limiting it, or really strongly and obviously warning you not to buy it unless you've got a PS4 Pro or a PS5, that would be okay. But if they're not putting that stuff in there, if that's not super clear to people that the game doesn't work properly on a system that they might be trying to play it on, then I don't think it should be there. Maybe it should only be on the store as a PS5 exclusive or something like that, which is obviously tricky as well, because as you've pointed out, it's not a PS5 game.
No, it's not a PS5 game, it's a PS4 game.
Yeah.
So to have a PS4 game as a PS5 exclusive is a bizarre thing. Obviously the rumours before this were that it would never come back to the PlayStation 4 and we would just be waiting for the PlayStation 5 version. Essentially, as it transpires, it has managed to get itself back onto the PlayStation 4 store. Also worth pointing out as well, talking about refunds and whatever, Xbox have also announced today, I believe, that they have reverted back to their standard return policy around Cyberpunk as well, because I think that they were basically giving a refund to anyone that wanted it in the face of the state, frankly, of Cyberpunk 2077, but they are now reverting back to their standard policy. Again, themselves basically saying the game is in a fit enough state where you're taking your own risk here, basically,
I mean, it does feel like both platform holders are sort of drawing a line under the whole fiasco now and sort of saying, yeah, it's up to you guys. If you want to play it, you can try and play it. You've read everything, you've heard everything. We might put a wee warning on the store page. It's up to you guys. And maybe ultimately that's kind of all they can do at the end of the day, other than just banning it. And obviously Xbox never have removed it from the store, as you say. So this is probably about as good as it gets, about as corrected as we're going to get. I did think, and I'm sure I've said it before on this, that we wouldn't see it back on the PlayStation Store until it was kind of fully sorted or there was the PS5 version. So I'm a little surprised to see it now, but I guess CDPR are putting pressure on and want that game available.
I don't even know what fully sorted looks like, to be honest with you, man. I'm not sure that this game ever really gets to be fully sorted. It really is a difficult one. What I would say is, knowing how the game runs on a PlayStation 5, I would not want to be playing this game on a base PS4. Official PlayersToo recommendation here is definitely do not play this game on a base PlayStation 4. Not recommended, but you do you. Alright, let's news item number 2. xCloud games are getting a Series X power upgrade and will also allow Xbox One gamers to play next-gen games. Xbox has confirmed that it is in the final stages of upgrading its xCloud data centers with a Series X hardware. It had been working on Xbox One hardware previously, so this is a noticeable upgrade. Apparently, there have already been upgrades to the graphics and loading times on Yakuza Like a Dragon, Rainbow Six Siege, and Dirt 5. But the bigger story here to me is that xCloud on Xbox One consoles will allow gamers to play next-gen games on last-gen consoles, which is fantastic for me as someone who owns an Xbox One X. But it does seem like they are giving me even less reason to upgrade to a Series X now, which is odd. It's an odd strategy from Xbox, I've got to say all of this, but again, it's all about them Games Pass subscriptions, right? Xbox have also hired ex-Portal and Left 4 Dead dev Kim Swift as a senior director of cloud gaming, who will focus on, quotes, new experiences in the cloud, very much implying that Xbox are going to be looking at developing xCloud-centric games, which in and of itself is quite interesting. Back at the beginning of the year, Lewis, this was one of my sort of predictions for this year, that we would see big moves from Xbox in the cloud space. They would really start to push in there. And then while I think that we are seeing that this year, I really think that the fruits of this will be in 2022 in reality. But this is huge steps as well. I know that there has also been rumblings that they will be bringing this over to televisions as well, either through an external device like what Stadia were doing with their Chromecast, or just literally an app on a TV. You know what I mean? I think there was a deal with Samsung going way, way, way back, and I could see something coming out of that pretty soon as well. But I think that when Microsoft and Xbox start really pushing xCloud, this could be a real big deal.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, xCloud is at the core of what Xbox is doing in the next generation. You know, it's definitely right now all the focus is on Game Pass and a bit on Series X and Series S, but you know that over the next couple of years, xCloud is going to become this other big tentpole of what Microsoft are doing in the gaming space. This is interesting. It's weird, like you say, that it does seem to devalue the Series X in a certain sense. You don't necessarily need one to play these games.
That's an interesting way to put it, actually. Yeah, the value that you get out of the Series X, I mean, you're not wrong at all. It has been lessened by this. I think that's a good way to put it, actually.
I can only assume that there will be limitations in terms of, you know, what level it can stream at, you know, what resolutions it can stream at. Presumably, in the same way that Game Pass works just now, you know, not every game is going to necessarily be available on xCloud all the time or at launch. So you might be waiting a while longer for it. I mean, Halo's a terrible example, is where I was going to go first, because they probably will make sure that does. But loads of the other games that come to Game Pass, you know, at the moment we see, you know, this game's on PC Game Pass, but not on console.
Yeah, not all of them are available on cloud. Yeah.
We might see that kind of situation. And I suppose the one other thing is that there will probably still be some games that you would rather play locally rather than on the cloud, you know, things that require really minuscule input lags and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the Halo campaign on cloud, fine. Yeah. The Halo multiplayer on cloud, probably not.
Probably not, exactly, yeah. And so I guess that there's still that judgment to be made for players, but overall, I mean, the idea that you can just boot up your old console and play these latest gen games, these massive improvements, it is pretty exciting. And if we do end up, and I think we will, I think you're spot on, this idea that it's eventually going to become a built-in app on TVs, or like an Amazon Fire Stick type situation where you just stick it into the back of whatever device you happen to be sat at that moment and grab a controller. I mean, if we're thinking of that, Mark, they have thought of that and they are working on it. Of course
Jesus,
they are.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's coming down the line, and all of that really, I mean, it's weird because it feels antithetical to selling console boxes, but it does feel in tune with what Xbox keeps saying about just wanting people in. They just want gamers to be able to play their games and be part of their ecosystem. You've got to say that it does chime with that.
I mean, to be fair, you're right, it does. And again, I think that we've said it for a long time, and quite frankly, I think everybody's been saying it for a long time because it's been incredibly obvious for a long time in that it's not about these console sales for Xbox, not in the same way that it is for Sony. It's about Games Pass subscriptions. Yeah. That is what it's about. It's about getting as many people subscribed to Games Pass as physically possible and increasing the value of that again and again and again and again. I sort of wonder when it's too good to be true, do you know what I mean? And when this whole house of cards comes crumbling down a little bit, to be honest. But as of right now, Games Pass is unreal. It is an unreal proposition and deal for a lot of gamers out there. Do you know what I mean? A lot of casual gamers that aren't necessarily bothered about getting huge tentpole titles, particularly on the Sony side, huge tentpole titles at 70 quid. Day one, I think that Games Pass is very, very appealing to those types of gamers, and in reality, those types of gamers make up more numbers than the people that would call themselves quote-unquote hardcore, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right, Lewis, news item number 3, and it's abandoned. It's abandoned, Lewis, and honestly, I would normally write a quippy little headline for something like this, but I am fucking exhausted by abandoned. I honestly hate that we have to talk about this because the whole fucking thing is just infuriating me at this point. For those of you that don't know, and quite frankly, if you've been on the internet and gaming spheres, I don't know how you fucking missed this. But for those of you that don't know, this is the game that was first shown off on the PlayStation Vlog in April. It is a survival horror game by an indie studio called Blue Box. Because this was from a basically unheard of studio and it's a survival horror game, everybody immediately jumped to, this is the new Silent Hill, and Kojima's involved for reasons. The studio at the time flat out denied this, putting out a message saying that they are neither affiliated with Konami or Kojima. And I basically thought that was the end of it, Lewis, but what a fool I was. What a fool I was. Because just after E3, the Blue Box Twitter account announced that Abandoned is actually just a code name, and the real name starts with an S and ends in an L. Obviously baiting the whole world into thinking Silent Hill. But their reaction, which might be the most infuriating thing about all of this, was, oh dear, oh, how could we possibly have thought that you would have went immediately to Silent Hill? Oh shucks, what a mistake that was. Like, obviously we were going to go there. Thus, the descent into madness began, Liz. And it felt as if the whole fucking internet took a swan dive down the rabbit hole. What I will say is that this could easily easily be a small studio trying to capitalise on a perceived link between their fledgling little studio and Silent Hill and Hideo Kojima. And if it is that, and it turns out that is the current situation, I think that is actually a pretty grubby thing to be doing. But there is, almost undeniably at this point, a lot of weirdness and coincidences around Blue Box Games lists. And Kojima has history here. He pulled a similar stunt with Metal Gear Solid 5 and PT to a lesser extent, but in the case of Metal Gear Solid 5, he even went to the point of hiring actors to continue a sort of similar charade. And speaking of actors, Lewis, the guy who allegedly runs Blue Box, Hassan Karaman, has now put out a video showing himself, but nobody believes it's fucking him. Everybody who believes that this is a Kojima game just thinks that this dude is an actor. And also it was discovered that when you translate the name Karaman from Turkish into Japanese, you get the name Hideo. And while that looks like a smoking gun, both of those names in English translate to the word hero. And it's completely reasonable that both of these cultures just call people hero. Completely reasonable. Blue Box had also announced that they would be releasing an abandoned trailers app on the 22nd, which has subsequently been delayed to the 25th, which is when this podcast will come out. So, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you know the situation by this point, and I just sound like a rambling madman.
What's new?
Well, I get what is new, yeah, absolutely. But that in and of itself, this abandoned trailers app is a bizarre thing. I mean, what is that even?
Yeah.
That's a totally new concept that this indie studio are launching on PlayStation 5 exclusively. Meanwhile, Sony are saying absolutely nothing about all of this. And a couple of the things that I was reading were saying that the silence from Sony and Konami was completely deafening, which I sort of agree with to a certain point. But that is the sort of level of conspiracy that we're dealing with here. Like, we're talking about translating a man's name from Turkish to Japanese, and the fact that an unheard of studio is launching a weird app, and it's all timed weirdly with Kojima stuff. The studio is apparently really registered in the Netherlands as well, but Kojima has also apparently just launched a studio in the Netherlands as well. It's absolutely... I'm not going to go through all the coincidences here. I can't deal with it. I don't have the energy, frankly. And there are a lot of coincidences, but a user, TPO01, has got a great post together on the Blue Point conspiracy. That's right, this thing has its own fucking subreddit, but he has put together a list of like all of this stuff in one place, and we'll link to that over in the show notes at PlayersToo.com. Really, genuinely great job by that guy. But... ladies and gentlemen, speaking of people who have swan dived down the rabbit hole, Lewis Camley, I get the sense that you're dying to say your piece on this.
Yeah, I mean, my tinfoil hat is getting pretty warm on this head, Mark.
It's a bizarre fucking thing, this, by the way. I like, to the point that I basically can't deal with it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I want to start. So I've gone back and forward on this. I've originally, months ago, when we first heard about this game and this rumour emerged, I thought, load of shite. In the last few days, I've convinced myself that it is true, and then when he put out the video yesterday or whatever it was in the last day or two, I thought, yeah, that's categorically not the case then, is it? But, you know, I'm still doubtful. There's so much around this. The thing is as well is that
the guy's apparently done interviews with Jason Schreier. It was only a phone interview, interestingly, but people that he is speaking to seem to believe that this is a real man, a real game dev. But all the other shit round about it is so weird, man. Yeah. Like, it's so bizarre.
Yeah, that is where I want to kind of start here, because I would say that seems to be a corner of the internet that are getting kind of annoyed that people are following the story in this way. And I just think, like, it's just a bit of fun. Like, if it ends up not being Kojima, fair enough. I mean, I do think it is pretty weird that they would tease like that and lean into it, and I do think it's the kind of thing that Sony by now would have said, shut the fuck up, stop drawing unnecessary attention to your game, because you're only going to get anger if it turns out not to be. There's so many aspects of this which make you go, oh, well, it basically must be, and then the next second you think, well, it can't possibly be Kojima. Overall, I think that there's a lot of smoke here. Whether the fire is what we think it is another question. This could be Silent Hill, but not Kojima. Kojima. It could be Kojima but not Silent Hill. It could just be a small survival horror game. But the trailer app, that is the thing that makes me kind of pause the most, because a lot of this other stuff are weird coincidences and things like in the recent Death Stranding trailer, Sam was wearing a blue suit and he got into a box, and on the back of his suit was a Holland flag, and it's, you know, all based in the Netherlands. There's all sorts of mad stuff like that I think is kind of reaching too far. That's where I say this is just a bit of fun. This is just like the Charlie Day meme of, you know, putting all the lines together and coming up with mad conclusions. But, you know, it's just kind of fun to do that. But ultimately, there's something odd about this game. It is an unheard of studio that is a PS5 exclusive that Sony have announced on their own blog, and that they're building this trailer app thing that we don't even know what those words mean, Mark. And when you look at that and you go, well, Horizon hasn't had that, Ratchet and Clank didn't get that, Returnal didn't get that, Miles Morales didn't get that, Demon's Souls didn't get that. What is it about this game? Really, the teaser trailer we got, which Blue Box, quote unquote, have said isn't even really the game itself. Like, they've said that it's not from the game, it's just a kind of teaser piece. So that in itself is weird. There's something going on here, I think. I don't want to hang my hat and say it's Kojima or not necessarily, whether it's Silent Hill or not. I think this story is so much fun in contrast to how angry it makes you. I hope that it is Kojima. I sort of hope that it is Silent Hill. We talk about Silent Hill a lot. I don't actually care that much about Silent Hill. I just thought PT was good and I want Kojima to do something else. You know, if it's Silent Hill, great. If it's not, whatever. I think that the whole story is just fascinating, and I love that there's still this kind of mystery possible in the internet age.
It's so elaborate. It's exhausting, Liz. Trying to keep up with all this stuff was fucking exhausting. I just sort of want it to be over. I don't find it anywhere near as much joy in this as you do, clearly. But mate, genuinely, I'm glad that you do. All I will say, and I'll leave this as the last word, is that we only know one other person that did a playable teaser. That's all I'll say.
Exactly. It's going to happen.
Oh, it's not. All right, ladies and gentlemen, news item number 4, and based firmly in reality, this one I feel. PSVR 2 is coming in 2022, according to a report from Bloomberg. It claims that they are aiming for the holiday period next year, which obviously makes a lot of sense. We have known since February that PlayStation are making a new PSVR system that will apparently take, quotes, dramatic leaps in performance and interactivity. We have also now seen the new orb-shaped controllers, which replace the ridiculous wand controllers, which I just hope vanish into the ether forever and we all forget existed. Sort of like that boomerang controller. I hope it goes the way of the boomerang controller, Liz. We also know that the new orb controllers will have haptic feedback and adaptive triggers like the DualSense controller. The previous PSVR system, which came out in 2016, has sold over 5 million units, and so far as I'm aware is still the best-selling VR headset ever made. And I think part of the reason for that is that the cost is much less than its competitors. Valve's Index will basically cost you damn nearly $1,000. I worked it out to be £919, including Half-Life Alyx, lucky us. But that includes like all the stuff, it includes like the base units and whatever, and the controllers and all that. The Oculus Quest 2 is significantly less at £437, but that didn't include like a camera or base units and stuff like that, which I thought was required. So I don't know, maybe there's additional money to be spent on top of that as well. Obviously, like Valve's Index is supposed to be the best VR headset that you can basically buy right now as well, which is why the price is what it is. But on top of that, you also need an incredibly powerful PC to make any of these headsets work reasonably, you know? So that's another huge expense on top of that, whereas I think that PlayStation can do well here again. If they price their headset sort of in line with that Quest 2, the sort of around £400 basically, I think that the mere fact of convenience, the fact that a lot of people will already have a PlayStation 5, whereas a lot of people might not have a PC good enough to run an Index well that is worth spending nearly $1,000 on, you know what I mean? I think that PlayStation can do well here again. I'm really glad that PlayStation are continuing to support VR because they are the only one in the console space that is, and I think that that's great because I think that it's still a really intriguing technology, and I think that really interesting games and experiences can still be made there, and I think Half-Life Alyx just proves that, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Even though we personally haven't dived too deeply into the VR space, I think, you know, it's another fledgling and growing area of video game development, and you're going to get good ideas there, and you're going to get interesting games, and you're going to get new developers or developers moving from traditional game spaces into VR and doing more interesting things. So any continued support from Sony, I think, is really good. And, you know, there's always a chance that these things will converge a bit, that, you know, we might end up seeing some currently non-PlayStation VR games coming to PlayStation, and, you know, we've seen PlayStation porting things to PC, so we might see some of those PlayStation VR exclusives eventually come to Oculus. I say all that to say that I hope that there's a bit of mutual support here and that it's not a super competitive space, because the more that all of these companies can kind of just collaborate and promote VR play, the more likely it is to really break through and become a major thing. But the PlayStation option here, I think, as you say, it's more convenient, it'll probably be more affordable, it looks decent with these new handsets. If they
anything's better than the one,
well, exactly.
Anything's better than the one.
And if they feel like the DualSense and they bring in some of that technology, all the more so you can see that will start to feel like a really, you know, a full experience that you're fully immersed in. So I think it's good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love to see more interplay, I suppose, between the various VR headset companies, I suppose. I think that the big drawback for Oculus is just that it's tethered to a Facebook account.
Yeah.
And I think it also requires like an always online connection as well, which is a bit bizarre because it always has to be tethered to your Facebook account. I think I read that somewhere. That could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, ladies and gentlemen. But
sounds like something they would do, though.
Yeah, it does. It fucking exactly does sound like something they would do. But I think PlayStation have the more accessible product, but Valve, I mean, still definitely have the best product. I mean, if we're saying what is the best headset here, I think the Index is comfortably wins that. As well, though, I think that for a long time, PlayStation were putting out the best games on VR as well, until basically Half-Life Alyx came along and ate everybody's lunch, you know what I mean? They've set the new bar, so if PlayStation are coming into this space seriously, they have to compete with Alyx. That is the bar that they have to reach, you know? And that is exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting, definitely.
Alright, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, Dead Space is rumoured to be getting a revival at the upcoming E3 event on July the 22nd. This is EA's we're not really at E3 but sort of event, so there we go. Jeff Grubb apparently teased that EA Motive, who recently made Star Wars Squadrons, would be working on an established IP, and he was not subtle at all about the fact that it was Dead Space. It was Dead Space. This has subsequently been corroborated separately by Gematsu and Eurogamer sources. Gematsu said that the game will be a reimagining of Dead Space rather than a sequel to the previous trilogy, which to me, Lois, is basically just saying soft reboot or maybe just a full reboot of the franchise, you know? Either way, this is great for fans. There hasn't been a Dead Space game since 2013, and I think every single year since then, the fans have been wanting another one, so this is great news.
Yeah, like you say, it's a fan favourite that people have been really clamouring for. I hope that whatever is meant by reimagining is something like a soft reboot and not a total pivot towards some other type of game, because that is the kind of thing that you could imagine EA doing in certain senses, but hopefully...
Do you think it's going to be a mobile game? Is that what you're saying?
Like a mobile game or Battle Royale or...
It's not going to be a Battle Royale. If this is Dead Space Battle Royale, the fans will lose their shit.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I have no reason to think it'll be those things, but I'm just saying I very much hope that it is kind of along the lines that people would hope that a Dead Space game is going to be, you know? Yeah,
I must admit, I've been threatening to get into horror games for a while, and I've still not got around to it, but one of the ones that always comes up, you have to play this if you're getting into horror games, is Dead Space. So this is great for me as well. Thumbs up. Alright, shout out number 2. On the PlayStation 5, Marvel's Avengers had been showing your IP address on the screen, which meant if you were streaming the game or you were using any of the system's capturing functionality, you were basically advertising your IP address to the whole fucking world. Obviously, this was a colossal fuck-up on Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix part. They have totally failed to protect anyone's on-the-line security, which I actually think that there should be pretty serious repercussions for, but of course there will ultimately be nothing. Although this was a incredibly careless fuck-up, Crystal Dynamics have published a patch apparently fixing the issues. This actually happened very shortly before we started recording this podcast. In fact, I actually wrote these notes out differently because this patch hadn't yet come out and I had to rewrite everything on the fly quite quickly. However, if you are going to be playing the Avengers, particularly on the PlayStation 5, please make sure that that game is up to date. Make sure the most recent patch is installed. Make sure that your fucking IP address is not being advertised to the world if you're going to be streaming the game, because, dear Lord, that is beyond stupid and careless from Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix, and that should absolutely never have happened. Cybersecurity, very serious, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone should take it seriously.
Absolutely.
Including the big companies you trust with your fucking data.
Yeah, you don't expect them to beam it out to everyone you're playing with. Yeah, just to echo that, definitely double check, make sure that you're up to speed on that, because it is not ideal.
Alright, let's shout out number 3. It seems that a change in the box art for Ghost of Tsushima has spurred rumours that the game might be coming to PC. Basically, the box art for the game has removed the text which reads only on PlayStation. This tagline was also removed from Days Gone's box and Horizon Zero Dawn's before they ended up on PC, so it's a good sign if you want to play this game on PC, basically. In a recent earnings call, though, PlayStation themselves basically leaked the fact that Uncharted 4 would be heading to PC, but there was no mention of Ghost of Tsushima, so far as I'm aware anyway. This would also be the quickest turnaround from a game releasing as a PlayStation exclusive and then coming to PC. The game isn't actually even a year old yet, but it is next month, so if they're going to announce something for that 1 year anniversary, this could easily be it. I wouldn't take this as hard proof, but Ghost of Tsushima on PC makes a hell of a lot of sense to me, and honestly, on high-end PCs, that game will look fucking beautiful.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, it makes total sense. Seeing that in the highest resolutions possible would be pretty amazing. I wonder if at that point we'll get a PS5 update patch as well. I'm not sure if we've had one for Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm not sure that we have either, now that you mentioned it.
We've definitely had God of War, and we've recently had The Last of Us Part 2, but I don't remember hearing that. But yeah, particularly with the Ghost of Tsushima Legends mode that they brought in after, the kind of multiplayer thing, that would work so well on PC. So you can see that they would just want to expand all that out. And fair enough, I still think it won't actually, if this is even real, it won't come as soon as the 1 year anniversary. They might announce it at that point, but it will release 6 months down the line or something. But
yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, to be honest with you. I think after a year would be quite soon by PlayStation standards, but I don't know, maybe this is setting a precedent for things going forward. 1 year exclusivity on the console, then let's get this stuff onto PC, do you know what I mean? This is a new PlayStation we're dealing with, Liz.
Yeah, very PC friendly one, yeah.
Very PC friendly. Alright, and shout out number 4. It seems that Back 4 Blood will require an always online connection to play the game, even if you're playing solo. Now, I'm hoping in reality this is going to affect very few gamers, as I'm sure that most people play, when they turn on their system, they are immediately connected to the internet anyway. That's the way it is for me. I'm sure it's the same way for you, Lewis. But we also had a very similar situation with Outriders recently, which required an always online internet connection, even if you were going to play the game by yourself. But due to server issues, it often meant that you couldn't get to play the game by yourself because you had to always be connected to these servers, and it wasn't even people's fault. But at the same time, also, if your internet drops out or whatever, then you're just stopped playing your single player experience, do you know what I mean? Just because you're not connected to the internet completely needlessly. Turtle Rock have said that they are apparently working on ways to support offline play, but if history has taught us anything, I wouldn't be anticipating that coming out anytime soon, if at all. And again, if history has taught us anything, online servers at launch aren't great. So unfortunately, I would anticipate a lot of people running into problems with this, particularly at launch, and because of the scope of the game as well. Do you know what I mean? To me, this is a worrying sign personally. Back 4 Blood was actually one of the darlings, I would say, of E3, but this does seem to have taken in some of the wind out of the sails. More than anything, I'm actually just sort of glad that gamers are still complaining about this loudly, because I think that it's bullshit. Like, I really do. Like, I think that if a game supports single-player only play, there is absolutely zero reason why that game has to have an internet connection. Do you know what I mean? If you're playing online, sure, like 100%. If you're playing a game like, I don't know, like World of Warcraft, like obviously the online component of that is basically the whole of the game. Like, I completely understand in situations like that. But if you're claiming that your game can be played single player, which this game can be with bots, then there's no need at all for an internet connection, and you're just ruining people's experience by doing that needlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. It remains a bit of a blight on modern gaming, this idea of constant online connections, particularly in cases like this when they're not needed. Let's just hope that when the game launches, and I think that they've said that they're going to work on not having it be constantly online after it launches, so hopefully there'll be no server issues and people can just enjoy the game.
Yeah, hopefully. Again, as I said, I wouldn't be holding my breath for that offline play personally, but hopefully. And just wanted to finish on surprise shout out to number 5, Lewis. It is Sonic's 30th birthday today, and believe it or not, it is also the N64's 25th birthday today. So happy birthday to an incredibly popular console which I never owned, and an incredibly popular franchise that I barely like. Cheers!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Alright, Lewis, time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our hidden gems from E3 2021, Lewis. Now, obviously, last week we done our recap show of E3 2021. There is also videos of us on YouTube reacting to all the showcases. Please go and watch them. We put a lot of effort into them. The art is really, really cool, done by my good friend Rebecca Cameron. I want to get more views on them, so we're going to be punting that for a while. Get used to this. Yeah, go and look at those on YouTube. They were actually turned out pretty good, I thought. But we couldn't possibly talk about all the announcements that we wanted to at E3, Lewis, in that show. So we have chosen some hidden gems that we think have maybe been a wee bit lost in the shuffle at E3 due to all the announcements that happened this week. So, Lewis, why don't you kick us off with your first hidden gem?
Will do, Mark. Yeah, well, one of the first ones for me, it was so hidden that I missed that it had been announced for several days after the original show.
Oh dear.
And this game is called Immortality, and it's by one of our very favourite indie game directors, Sam Barlow.
Certainly is.
Whose
Yes.
games Her Story and Telling Lies have both been part of our play-along series before. You'll have heard us talk about them multiple times. Those games are all FMV puzzle games, essentially working out what the hell is going on in some kind of mysterious situation by watching video clips. That's the absolute bare bones description of a Sam Barlow game.
Her Story is something quite special.
Yeah, Her Story, I think,
really, really incredible game.
For both of us, really hit the mark. And so this game, we don't know very much about it. It was announced right at the end of the Future Games show, and that's why I missed it, because I never watched that live. But the game basically seems to be about some kind of actress who had appeared in 3 films. It has a kind of weird sort of classic Hollywood, like 1950s Hollywood vibe about it. But none of her films were ever released, and I think she's disappeared basically as the game starts, and I suspect we're going to try to work out what on earth happened to her. But Mark, the thing that really excites me about this is that within the trailer it announces there is writing from 3 different people as well as Sam Barlow involved in the game. They are Alan Scott, Amelia Gray and Barry Gifford. Now those people were not names that I knew, but Alan Scott worked on Queen's Gambit, which has just been on Netflix. He also worked on Don't Look Now, which is one of the most iconic, stylish and perfect horror films of all time. And if you know that film, anyone out there, it's not super niche, it is an absolutely incredible movie. Amelia Gray worked on Mr. Robot and Maniac, neither of which I've watched, but they have decent followings.
Well, I've not seen Don't Look Now, but I've seen Mr. Robot, so I can confirm that's pretty good as well.
Barry Gifford, Mark, the third person here, worked on 2 films that I know of, at least, Wild at Heart and Lost Highway, both of which are David Lynch films, Mark. And both of which,
that's interesting,
particularly Lost Highway, are completely fucking mental. And that alone has made me extremely excited for this game.
Nice one, man. I didn't know any of that shit. Holy fuck, that's got me excited for this game. Dearie me.
So, Mark, what about you? What hidden gems are you picking out?
Well, Lewis, I'm going to try and pronounce this first game correctly. I believe it is Vocabulantis, which is from a Danish studio called Kong Orange. And this is a stop-motion game, which is nothing I have ever seen before. It looked fucking incredible.
It really did, yeah.
And the little section that they showed you, how the guy from the studio was like building all these models in stop motion and how they were changing them all into like wireframes to be used within the game. Literally building these models, physically building these models was absolutely incredible. It very much gave me vibes of Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs, which was stop motion but also quite sinister looking somehow, and this has a very, very similar vibe, just while we're comparing things to Hollywood, I suppose. The animation does look absolutely incredible. I think the game at its heart seems to be a puzzle platformer, which I am basically always up for as well. It is one of the most interesting indie games I've seen in a very, very long time. It genuinely looks fantastic. I did see written somewhere that it was slated for release in Q3 2024 because stop motion takes fucking ages. But it does look spectacular, or I think it looks spectacular anyway.
Yeah, I thought it really did as well. Kind of co-op platformer, got sort of limbo-y vibes to me as well in the way that it plays. I thought it looked really cool. Just extremely quickly, there was one other stop-motion game shown at one of the other shows called Harold Halibut that also looked very Wes Anderson to me. I thought it looked really interesting, and that one seemed to be coming a bit sooner. So if the stop-motion thing is grabbing anyone, I would take a wee look at that as well.
Yeah, the way that they were doing the animation was stunning.
It's
absolutely
amazing.
Stunning.
It's really amazing.
It translates so well to a video game as well. Like the way that they were capturing light. Like honestly, go and watch the thing. We'll put links to all the ones that we mentioned in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. But fuck me, this game looked amazing. It really did. The way that they were capturing light and everything was just incredible.
Well, speaking of really amazing animation, Mark, my next one is maybe not a super hidden gem because a lot of people have been talking about this, but in case any of our listeners haven't picked it up, there's a game called Sable, which is coming out in September, and I think it is coming to Xbox Game Pass, possibly, on day one. At least it's coming to Xbox as a console exclusive in the short term, and this game is a really gorgeous open world exploration adventure game. If you look at the trailers for it, it has sort of elements of Journey. It has very evident elements of Breath of the Wild. It's so hard to not compare games to that these days. It seems to be set in this kind of really strangely hand-drawn, kind of line-drawn desert scape, essentially.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the first thing that will strike you about this game is the way that it looks, because it looks incredible and, like, quite frankly, like nothing I've ever seen before. Again, this game seems to have been like doing the rounds a little bit, and I had never heard of this game at all. Like, I think that I'm relatively plugged into the indie scene, and this game took me completely by surprise, and it looks amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing.
It looks really great, and I think it was one of the ones that there was a demo released for as part of the Idea Xbox showcasey thing that they were doing, and yeah, I was just reading little bits and pieces of people's reactions to it, and it seems like there's a bit more to it than it might seem. Like, it doesn't seem like it's just a big empty Journey world in that sense. Like, there's quests, kind of humour and that sort of stuff in it as well, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what this game's doing, and it's only a couple of months away.
Well, I'm just reading here, Lewis, that the planet was apparently designed for Jakku from Star Wars, and that the art style was inspired by Studio Ghibli, which you can totally see. Alright, Lewis, one of mine as well, which I think is a bit more niche, is White Shadow, and this is by German studio Monokill. They described their game like if Inside and Tim Burton had a baby that was born in 1984, and that ticked a lot of boxes for me right away. I think that I've actually seen this game before somewhere, although I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's set in this dystopian future and you sort of play as animals, but it's in this really cool black and white aesthetic where it almost looks as if the brightness on your monitor's been turned up too high. Like the whites are like really
sort of shining out,
like oversaturated almost. I think, don't get angry at me video people if that's the wrong term, but I hope that sort of gets across. It almost looks like old TV footage, and honestly it looked absolutely stunning. Again, it's a sort of puzzle platformer much in the same vein as Inside, which I think has inspired so many of these games, and that apparently is coming out this year as well, which is really, really exciting for me because I really thought it looked very, very cool indeed. Apparently it's going to be quite dark, which again ties into Inside, but yeah, really fantastic looking game for me.
Nice one. Yeah, you can definitely feel the influence of Playdead on a lot of these games.
Definitely.
Maybe that's a good point to mention one from the Xbox showcase, actually, which we did touch on a little bit when we were doing reactions and that kind of thing. But a game called Somerville, which is coming from the original co-founder of Playdead, who made Limbo and Inside, and it looks, very similar to those games. A similarly kind of dark, creepy aesthetic, side-scrolling puzzle platformer by the looks of things. This is the one where your man's got a dog as well, I believe, which is always great to see in a video game.
Not if the dog dies, though. If the dog dies, I can't deal with this.
But yeah, I'm sure we're going to get a hell of a lot more about that because it was, as I say, part of Xbox's major showcase, and I'm sure they'll be leaning into it. But definitely for anyone like us who, and seemingly a lot of the game development world who loved Limbo and Inside, I think that is one that you will certainly be playing.
Yeah, that looks incredible. Honestly, it was one of the standout indies from the whole of E3 for me. That it looked absolutely fantastic. The next one from me, Lewis, is a game called Walk, and this is by Kazumi Games. This was actually part of several trailers from Asobu Games, which seems to be a collective of indie developers in Tokyo, which is really cool. So this is from a Japanese studio. It's a Japanese horror game. It seems very inspired by early PS1 era in my mind. The graphics even look as if you're playing on a CRT monitor to me. It works with fixed camera angles, much like the early Resident Evil games. It looks as if you are being chased in the game as well by the sort of ghost from Spirited Away. you know the one with the mask, apart from very, very tall and creepy looking. The game actually already appears to be out in some fashion. I believe that there's a beta or something like that, and it seems as though that they're planning to do a Kickstarter as well. I really think that the concept for that game is really interesting. It really looks like a throwback to games from mine and Melissa's childhood in a really creepy, well done, quite interesting looking way, and it's definitely something to keep your eye on for me.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It was on my list to mention as well. I didn't think it would appeal to you necessarily, but
I'm getting any horror games. You're getting any horror games, and you need to do the research. You need to do the research on what ones are good, and that one looked good.
Yeah, I thought it looked really fantastic. I can imagine that it might never release, or it might end up being quite a small thing. Yeah, it was one of my most interested games of the whole E3 weekend. Even actually, one of the other games that they showed called Electhead, which was just a wee puzzle platformer that just looked really quite intelligent, the way that the puzzles were being solved. It was kind of like you could remove your head, which acted like a battery, in order to electrify certain platforms and turn on certain areas and stuff like that. I just thought the two of those games, they showed the third game, which I was a lot less interested in, but those two coming from Asubo, I thought looked really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say that the bit at the end of the trailer where the tall masked ghost looking thing catches the girl was pretty terrifying. Looked really, really creepy. Looked really creepy. Again, we'll put links to all these trailers and whatever over in the show notes at PlayersToo.com.
One final one from me would be Death's Door, that we saw at Day of the Devs and also at the Devolver Showcase really briefly, and that's actually coming just next month. I think it's July 20th it's coming out. This is again a sort of an isometric, slightly cartoonish art style action platformer, I guess we would say. It's not entirely sure really yet. It looked a lot to me like Bastion in terms of the combat, which again that's the game from Supergiant that we absolutely adored when we played it.
It started the journey.
Hades. And exactly. If you don't know who we're talking about, it's the company who made Hades, which is one of the biggest games of last year. So Death's Door is coming, as I say, from a company called Acid Nerve and Devolver Digital, and you can always trust Devolver Digital, of course. It just looks kind of dark, but not like super gothic, kind of like a humorous darkness to it. It seems to be that you're playing as a raven who is part of a community who kind of shepherd souls into the afterlife, but something's gone wrong and you have to go off on an adventure. Kind of Zelda vibe about it as well, earlier Zelda games. I think it looks really interesting. There was a fair bit of buzz around it, and I think that's one to keep an eye out. And literally a month away, it's great.
Yeah, I must admit, if you were pleased that I brought up Walk, then I am so pleased that you brought up Death's Door as well. This was one for me as well. I thought it looked great. As you said, it sort of looks like Bastion meets those early Zelda games, thinking particularly of Link's Awakening. Looks fantastic. Very much up my street. And I will finish this on possibly the weirdest game that I've seen at the whole of E3, and that is Despelote.
Nice. Oh, I am really glad that you mentioned that. Genuinely. I've been telling people about this game. Carry on.
This is by Julian Cordero and Sebastian Volbuna. And I'm sorry if I'm fucking butchering those names, guys. I very, very much apologise. Both are from Ecuador. And this game is set in 2001, just as Ecuador were about to qualify for the 2002 World Cup, which is the first time that the country would ever have done so. The game is apparently also like semi-autobiographical, which is interesting as well. It seems very much like a slice of life experience, this game. But the first thing that you will notice about this game is the art style. And oh my god, it is like nothing I have ever seen. It looks incredible. It looks a bit like Obra Dinn, but also not really.
Yeah.
And all the characters look like they were made out of paper cutouts. It is a bizarre looking thing, and it has grabbed my attention so much. And I don't know if just because the Euros are going on right now and I'm just in a football and headspace, and the fact that this game is apparently about how a country qualifying for a big tournament like that can really bring a country together and can really bring people together, which is something that we in Scotland are experiencing right now, because for the first time in 23 years we've also qualified for a big tournament. I feel that, and when they were talking about this game, I felt the way that they were talking about it, and it absolutely grabbed my attention. I'm so glad that your reaction to that as well, because, like, for me, I didn't know if this game just looked absolutely bizarre and wild to people, or in actual fact, it looked as good as I thought that it did, because it looks like nothing I've ever seen before, and I'm very, very interested in it because of that.
Definitely. That World Cup, I think, is the one that will hold the most nostalgia for you and I probably as well, because we were kids at that point. It was sort of the first one that you properly experienced. Yeah, I just saw that game being been described as the ability to experience another country's cultural nostalgia, and I just think that alone as an idea is really fascinating and all bound up with the football. Totally, I'm really excited about it, and I'm glad you are too.
Oh man, 100%. I just thought that in concept it was so interesting, like talking about games as like an art form and stuff like that. The way that they were talking about it, what they were talking about trying to accomplish with it was like, I was just like, yes, oh my god, yes, this is what the indie scene's all about. I love them for that as well. And also a game out of Ecuador, never even have ever heard of a game out of Ecuador. The first thing that I have heard, it looks fucking incredible. And one thing I would like to say about all of this is that I think every single one of the games that I mentioned came from like a different country that wasn't America, basically.
Yeah, nice.
A lot of them were European, German, Danish, obviously Japan, but a very, very small Japanese studio, and Ecuador as well. Like the breadth of indie games that we have from different cultures and stuff like that now is just so fucking great. And I really think that we reap the rewards of that. We just see such different experiences. We're so fucking lucky to live in a time where the indie scene is the way that it is, because there is just so much out there. It's fucking great. And E3 really highlights that, and I think that it is good that we done something like this, like Hidden Gems, because there are so much that just will never get talked about. Despolita will never really be talked about. I'm sure nobody's basically talking about that in the wake of a new fucking Metroid game and Halo multiplayer. And you know what? Fair enough. Like, people should be talking about that and should be excited about those things if they're fans. But there's still so much under the surface that is so exciting, or for me anyway.
Absolutely,
and I just love it. I just absolutely fucking love it.
Yeah, there are so many games that we could have mentioned on top of these. There's so much across that whole weekend, and it's just, I totally agree with you. It's so exciting to see the depth and breadth of ideas coming out across the globe, and it's amazing. So dig in, find your own hidden gems, definitely, and tell us what they are.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. I know I say it twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. It genuinely helps us out a lot. While you're over there, if you could leave us a review as well, again, it just helps us out even more. And thank you, genuinely thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us, because it does mean a huge amount. And thank you. It means the world. I'd also like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Greece, and I think we have now both started it, Lewis. I'm very, very interested to talk about this game. Very, very interested indeed.
I made a start on it last night, and I think we're talking about that just next week, so tune in for that.
Very much so, very much so. Very exciting. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.